They didn't invite me to my own father's will reading. Not that I was surprised. After 5 years of silence, my stepmother apparently decided I was no longer family enough to be included. But what she didn't know, what they all didn't know, was that my father had already set the board in motion long before he took his final breath. And when I laid those property deeds on the table, the look on her face worth every single second of exile. Let me rewind. It started on a wet, thunder-heavy Monday in Sydney. I was halfway through closing a multi-million-dollar eco-housing project when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years, Leah Stone, my childhood best friend. "Eli," she said, her voice trembling, "your dad's gone. He passed last night. 5 years. That's how long it had been since I'd left Halston, the picturesque little town I once called home. 5 years since the argument that cracked my relationship with my dad wide open. 5 years of missed calls, unopened birthday cards, and deafening silence. Now he was gone. And I was going back. The cab pulled up outside the old Weatherly estate, the same Victorian-style house where I'd learned to ride a bike, built my first treehouse, and scribbled my first business plan on the back of a cereal box. It looked smaller somehow, sadder. Maybe it was just the gray sky, or maybe it was knowing he wouldn't be inside waiting for me with his usual, "So what did you break this time?" Instead, parked in the driveway was a sleek silver BMW Diana's car, along with a brand new Land Rover and a Tesla with personalized plates that screamed Tiwa L01. I could guess who that belonged to. I barely touched the front gate before the door swung open. There stood Madison, my stepsister, tall, rigid, wearing a black dress that looked like it had been chosen more for optics than grief. "Eli," she said flatly, stepping aside. "Didn't expect you." I didn't dignify that with an answer, just rolled my suitcase in over the threshold. Inside it was like a modern furniture catalog threw up on my childhood. Cold metallic shelves, all white everything. The oak and leather that once gave the place warmth, gone. "Your room's been converted into a gym," she said. "Guest room's upstairs." I nodded, noted the lack of eye contact, the stiffness in her jaw. I wasn't welcome. That part was loud and clear. Down the hall, Diana held court like a grieving queen, sipping tea from a porcelain cup, surrounded by town officials and real estate agents like vultures around a carcass. When she saw me, she blinked. Once, twice, then pasted on a smile as if we'd just bumped into each other at Whole Foods. "Eli, darling, what a surprise," she cooed, rising to air kiss me. We tried reaching out. "But of course your number must have changed." It hadn't. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said, my voice as neutral as Switzerland. She gave a fake sympathy head tilt. "We've arranged everything already. The service is tomorrow. Just close family for the reading of the will, I'm sure you understand." And there it was. The dismissal. The exile. She wasn't even subtle about it. That night, I sat alone on the backyard steps, watching the wind shake the branches of the old maple tree I used to climb as a kid. Leah joined me, handing over a coffee and a handful of hard truths. "They've been selling off parcels, Eli. Meeting with developers. Talking about turning the downtown block into high-rise condos. It's like your dad's legacy doesn't matter. Did he know?" Leah nodded, eyes misty. "He tried reaching out. Said he missed you. He kept your articles, the ones about your projects in Malaysia, Tokyo, even that interview you did in Architect Digest. He kept them in his office." "His office still the same?" "Not anymore," she said bitterly. Diana cleared it out, changed the locks. Typical. But there was one thing she didn't know. One thing not even Diana could erase. At midnight, I slipped into the old study. The door was locked, but I remembered the loose floorboard where Dad hid the emergency key. That hadn't changed. Inside it was stripped bare. Files gone, furniture gone. Except for one painting still hanging above the fireplace, the Count of Monte Cristo, Dad's favorite. It was the last gift he ever gave me. On my 16th birthday, he inscribed it, "To Eli, remember revenge is best served patient and precise." As I took it off the wall, an envelope slid out. It was addressed to me. Inside a single-page letter, in Dad's bold handwriting. "Eli, if you're reading this, then I've gone and Diana has already tried to lock you out. Don't let her. There's a key taped to the back of the painting. Go to Oak Bridge Bank, box 142. You'll understand everything then." I'm sorry for how things ended, but I've never stopped being proud of you. Love, Dad. My pulse thundered in my ears. The next morning, I stood outside Oakbridge Bank just before it opened. I had barely slept. The key felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my pocket. Inside box 142 were two things: a thick folder of documents, property titles, trust transfers, and a flash drive. Back at my hotel, I opened the files. And there it was, the Weatherly Strip, the Riverside Development, the Halston downtown block. Every property my father once told me we'd build together, he had transferred them all to me through trusts, gifts, quiet sales at $1 documents signed and notarized. Over the last 3 years, my father had moved 80% of his holdings out of Harrison Developments, the family company, and into my name through a new LLC EJ Legacy Group. The last file was a video. My father, thinner, older, looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, Eli, then I'm gone. But I had to find a way to make sure our plans, the real plans, didn't die with me. Diana wanted to turn everything into profit. You wanted to turn it into purpose. I finally see which one matters more. Everything's yours now. Just make me proud. My hands were shaking. All these years, I thought he chose Diana, that he believed her lies, but he was protecting me and protecting our vision. Diana thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming. You know that surreal, slow-motion feeling when you walk into a room and everyone suddenly forgets how to breathe? That was the moment I stepped into Stevenson & Co. law offices at exactly 1:55 p.m. the next day. I was dressed sharp, not flashy, just focused. Charcoal gray suit, navy tie, polished shoes. The kind of outfit that doesn't scream power, just assumes it. In my hand, a leather briefcase heavy with everything my father left me, both literally and symbolically. The receptionist blinked at me like I was a glitch in the Matrix. "Can I help you?" she asked, polite but uncertain. "Eli Wexler. I'm here for the reading of my father's will." She went pale. One moment. She scurried down the hall and returned with none other than Harold Stevenson himself. He was shorter than I remembered. Or maybe my patience for his brand of smug shrank over the years. Either way, his expression was exactly what I expected, half surprise, half constipation. "Eli, we weren't expecting you." I gave him a tight smile. "Good thing I didn't come for your hospitality." Harold looked like he wanted to object, but he didn't. Instead, he adjusted his glasses and muttered, "This meeting is intended for immediate family and named beneficiaries." "I'm both," I said, walking past him without another word. The conference room was quiet until I opened the door, then dead silence. Diana sat at the head of the table like she was born there in a black silk blouse and pearl earrings that screamed, "I won." Next to her, Madison, arms crossed, expression blank. On Diana's other side was her son Tanner, who looked more like a bored influencer than the heir to anything remotely valuable. There were also two people I didn't recognize, probably Diana's advisors, and a guy I did recognize, Logan Black, attorney for Grayfield Holdings. And Grayfield. Well, that's the development firm Diana had been whispering to behind everyone's back. Let's just say I didn't shake hands. Diana's eyes met mine, and I watched it happen, that flicker of confusion that morphed into discomfort, then panic. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. So I gave her my best poker face and slid into the chair directly across from her. "I hope you don't mind," I said calmly. I figured I'd stop by and pay my respects and collect what's mine. Harold cleared his throat, shuffled some papers, and started reading. "To my beloved wife, Diana Wexler, of course. I leave our residence at 201 Weatherly Lane along with $2 million in cash and a portion of income-generating assets sufficient to maintain her lifestyle." Diana's lips tightened. She didn't look pleased, more like she expected more zeros. "To my stepdaughter Madison, I leave a trust in the amount of $750,000. A flicker of a smile from Madison. No emotion, just calculation. "To my stepson Tanner, I leave my collection of vintage watches and $1 million to be dispersed in annual increments." Tanner yawned. Then came the pause. The long one. "To my son, Eli Wexler, I leave all remaining business interests held in Wexler Property Group LLC, including management rights, control of the board, and decision-making authority over future developments." I could feel the oxygen get sucked out of the room. But Harold wasn't finished. In addition, I appoint Eli as the sole successor trustee of the Wexler Legacy Trust, which holds controlling ownership of all downtown Halston holdings, the Riverside Project, and the Weatherly Commercial Block. Diana actually stood up. "This is a mistake," she said, voice trembling. "That version was replaced. Richard signed a new will. 2 years ago." Harold looked miserable. "I received a superseding codicil last week, filed and notarized." She stared at him. "You never told me." "I didn't know," he admitted, and I could almost respect the way he owned it. Almost. Now, if you've ever watched someone realize they don't own what they thought they owned, you'll know the specific kind of silence that follows. It's not loud, it's dense. Diana reached for her water glass but missed. Madison grabbed it instead. "I've been running the company," Diana said, trying to collect herself. Eli abandoned his responsibilities. I let her rant. "He left. He moved to Asia. He's been gone for 5 years. How can he just come back and take back what was already his?" I said, cutting in. Then I opened my briefcase and laid out the deeds. Here are the ownership transfers filed, notarized, and recorded over the last 3 years. My father and I may have disagreed, but he knew what he was doing, and apparently he saw what you were doing too. Tanner's chair scraped loudly as he stood up. "This is bullshit." "Sit down," Madison said quietly, not even looking at him. Diana reached for the papers, but I stopped her hand. "I'd prefer if you didn't touch what no longer belongs to you." What followed was 20 minutes of chaos. Legal jargon, raised voices, Diana threatening to contest everything, Tanner shouting about fraud and manipulation. Madison, the only one among them with half a brain, just sat there absorbing it all like a sponge. Meanwhile, Logan Black's expression went from smug to sour. The man realized in real time that the Riverside deal, the one they'd already floated to investors, was gone. "Your father wouldn't have done this," Diana said finally, her voice shaky. "Not if he was in his right mind." I leaned forward. "He did it because he was in his right mind. Because he realized you were carving up the town like a turkey at Thanksgiving. Because you turned his company into a cash register and Halston into a commodity. And because he trusted me to clean it up." The meeting ended with Harold agreeing to send certified copies of all documents to my attorneys. Diana stormed out first. Madison followed, calm, cold, unreadable. Tanner muttered something about suing everyone in the room. Logan didn't say a word. And me. I gathered my documents, gave Harold a polite nod, and walked out like I had just reclaimed something sacred. Because I had. That night, I didn't sleep. I went through every document again. Every note Dad left. Every file on the USB drive. His instructions were clear. His values even clearer. He didn't just want me to inherit land and buildings. He wanted me to inherit the vision. Affordable housing, local business space, environmental design. Halston's future wasn't supposed to look like Beverly Hills. It was supposed to belong to the people who built it. I wasn't just back. I was home. By morning, the whole town knew. Small towns are funny like that, no official statement needed. Just a couple of overheard conversations at the bakery and a few "you didn't hear this from me" texts. By the time I walked into the old Wexler Properties office, now under my control, the receptionist stood up like she'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Wexler," she stammered. I smiled. "Let's get to work." The first thing I did as acting CEO of Wexler Properties, I replaced every lock in the building. Call it symbolic, call it petty, I call it necessary. There were too many keys floating around that office, keys in the wrong hands, keys given to people who cared more about power than preservation. That era over. The office itself felt like a mausoleum when I stepped in the next morning. Gray carpet, glass walls, plants long dead from neglect. A blown-up photo of a high-rise concept hung in the lobby, sharp, sterile, soulless. They'd rebranded since I left. New logo, new colors, same heartless agenda. I walked past the front desk through the main corridor and into the old executive boardroom. The place where my father once sketched floor plans on napkins. The place where he promised me when I was 16 and full of dreams that one day it would all be mine. And now it was, except the dream was warped, twisted by greed and committees and backroom deals. Leah was waiting inside, pacing by the whiteboard with a folder under her arm. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked, half smiling. "No," I said, "but I'm here anyway." She handed over the folder. Everything I could pull on short notice. Contracts, internal memos, zoning requests. "It's not good, Eli." I skimmed through the pages. They'd already pushed plans through city council to turn half of downtown into high-rise condos and luxury retail. The local grocery store scheduled for demolition. The youth shelter gone, replaced by valet parking. My father's name was still on half the proposals, rubber-stamped like he'd signed off on them himself. But the handwriting told a different story. He hadn't touched these. They were forged. Or coerced. Or both. "You think Diana knew he was changing the trust?" I asked. Leah nodded. She knew something was up. She was pushing for everything to close fast. Tried to rush that Riverside deal before the new fiscal year. When your dad started dragging his feet, she brought in outside pressure. Blackmail. Maybe not directly, but threats, legal posturing, playing the "you're not well" card. It was all there. I leaned back in my chair, trying to breathe through the fury. They had him cornered. He didn't die from illness. He died from exhaustion. They didn't just bury him. They erased him. I spent the rest of the day reviewing everything: emails, digital archives, voice memos Dad had left on his tablet. Most of them never shared, never heard. "Eli, if you're reading this, I don't know if we ever made peace. But I need you to know I saw what they were doing. I tried to stop it. I just ran out of time. You were always the better builder. Not because you saw blueprints, because you saw people." I sat there for an hour just listening. Not moving, not speaking. The company wasn't broken. It was betrayed. And fixing it would take more than audits and legal cleanup. It would take a war. By Friday, word had gotten around that I wasn't just visiting. I was staying, and not everyone was thrilled. That afternoon, I walked into the first full staff meeting since the transition. 22 employees, some who'd been there since I was a teenager, some hired under Diana. Half curious, half cold. I stood at the head of the long oak table. No slideshow, no pitch deck, just me. "My name's Eli Wexler," I said. "Some of you know me, some of you probably wish you didn't." A few chuckles, mostly silence. I know this company's been through hell the last few years, and I know I've been gone. Still no reaction, just stares. But here's what I also know. My father didn't build this place on profit margins and political favors. He built it on trust, on real, livable communities, on making sure the people in Halston could afford to live in the town they worked in. I let that hang. And somewhere along the way, we lost that. Now I saw shifts in posture, eyebrows raised, phones lowered. I'm not here to clean house, but I am here to rebuild. A beat passed. Which means if you're only here for the bonuses and buyouts, you should probably clear your desk. Someone in the back coughed. Another looked away. But if you're here because you still believe in building something that lasts, then welcome to the real Wexler Properties. After the meeting, a woman named Anna, the office manager, pulled me aside. "I was here when your dad started the downtown rehab project," she said. "He fought for months just to get the community center rezoned. They shut it down last year. No notice." "I know. I thought about quitting." "Why didn't you?" She hesitated. "Because someone had to stay and remember how it used to be." I nodded slowly. "You ready to help me make it that way again?" Her eyes lit up. "Yeah, I am." Over the next week, I started reshaping everything. First, I called in a forensic accountant to review all project invoices. Then I contacted the local mayor's office to request a temporary hold on all Wexler-backed developments until further review. That alone sent tremors through City Hall. But I wasn't done. I publicly withdrew the company's support for the Riverside Tower, a project Diana had championed. And I didn't do it quietly. I sent a formal statement to the Halston Tribune. "We will not profit from displacing the very people this company was founded to serve. The new Wexler Properties will prioritize affordability, sustainability, and transparency, not luxury for outsiders." The article dropped the next morning, and so did Diana's composure. She showed up at my office 3 hours later, uninvited, wearing her usual faux sympathy smile like it was armor. "You've made quite a splash," she said, breezing in like she still owned the place. "I thought you might call first. I figured this was better face-to-face, more civilized." I leaned back in my chair. If you want civilized, you probably shouldn't have lied to my father or tried to erase his company. She didn't flinch. I did what I had to. He was weak, losing focus, letting sentiment get in the way of smart business, and I'm guessing forging his signature was just an unfortunate clerical error. Diana's expression tightened. You can't prove that. I don't have to, I said. Not yet. But I have enough to trigger a review of every deal you brokered in the last 3 years. And trust me, the press loves a scandal, especially one wrapped in inheritance drama and real estate fraud. She stood suddenly less composed. This company was fine without you. Sure, I said. If fine means soulless, corrupt, and 3 months from collapse. She moved toward the door, then turned. You think this town wants you back? You think they'll rally behind the prodigal son? I didn't answer right away. Then I smiled. I don't need the whole town, just the ones who still give a damn. After she left, I looked out the window. The sun was just starting to break through the clouds. For the first time since I'd returned, Halston didn't feel haunted. It felt ready. When you start unraveling corruption in a small town, it doesn't fight back with fists, it fights with whispers. The Monday after I shut down the Riverside project, my inbox flooded with everything from polite inquiries to not-so-subtle threats. You're disrupting jobs, Eli. We had investors lined up. Your father would never. That last one, that one hit a nerve, because I'd seen the truth. In his writing, in his eyes on that video, in the last-ditch safeguards he'd left behind, one signature at a time. My father did try to stop them. He just didn't live long enough to finish the job. Now the unfinished business was mine. The real tipping point came 3 days later. Anna walked into my office holding a single sheet of paper, no folder, no notes, no preamble. You need to see this. I scanned the document. At first glance, it looked like a routine invoice consulting fees from Grayfield Holdings. But something was off. The dates didn't line up. The figures had been inflated, and more than that, they were duplicated across multiple departments. When I overlaid it with our vendor payment logs, the pattern came into focus. Same amounts, same time frames, different internal codes. They weren't just cutting corners. They were double billing. That night, I pulled up the internal finance archive and ran a manual search on every Grayfield-linked vendor we'd used over the past 5 years. 3 hours later, I had a working list of shell companies' dummy accounts and padded consulting charges that bled over $3.8 million from the company. Money funneled quietly month by month. No red flags, no whistleblowers. Just silent theft papered over by strategic partners. Diana wasn't just aggressive. She was criminal, I called Leah. You sitting down? I asked. Uh-oh, she replied, already halfway through a yawn. How bad? 3.8 million, minimum, gone. Holy wait, gone like missing, gone like laundered through Grayfield and their shell firms. Some of them trace back to Tanner. Others looks like they used her real estate license to sign them. Leah was quiet for a second. Then I have a friend, works compliance for an ethics watchdog. She'll know where to start. Already ahead of you, I said, but have her ready anyway. What do you want to do? Build a case, then light the whole thing on fire. The next morning, I contacted Claire Renaud, a sharp, no-nonsense forensic auditor my father had hired briefly during a merger 10 years ago. She remembered him well. He was the only CEO I ever saw bring a lunch for the interns, she said when we met, and the only one who let me challenge a senior VP to his face. Claire didn't waste time. Within 2 days, she had a report detailing nearly a dozen breaches of fiduciary duty, including unauthorized asset sales document tampering and direct conflicts of interest between Diana and Grayfield's board. I wasn't surprised, but I was angry all over again. This wasn't just about money. It was betrayal of trust, of legacy, of everything Dad built. At the end of the week, I met with the board. Only 3 of the original members remained. The others had been quietly replaced by Diana in the last 2 years. I called the meeting to order. This won't be a long session. I began sliding copies of Claire's report across the table. But it will be a serious one. One by one, the members read through the findings. No one interrupted. No one looked up. Then I leaned in. What you do next will define your reputations. Either you back me in removing Diana and severing all contracts with Grayfield, or I go public. With everything. Including your signatures. A tense pause. Finally, Jim Lawrence, the longest-serving member, cleared his throat. "I served with your father for 15 years. I should have seen this coming. You've got my vote." The others followed, reluctant but resigned. Unanimous. The motion passed. Diana and Grayfield were out. Officially. By sunset, I had filed a formal civil claim against Diana and Tanner asset misappropriation, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud. I didn't do it for the optics. I did it because somebody had to. Leah and I sat outside the Weatherly estate later that evening, watching the last light fade behind the ridge. "You really going to go through with the lawsuit?" she asked. "I already have." She stared ahead. "It's going to get ugly." I nodded. Truth usually does. Then softer. "Thanks for sticking around." She looked at me, eyes narrowed slightly. "Why'd you leave Eli?" I exhaled, not annoyed, just tired. My dad and I argued about the company, about the way it was expanding. He wanted to slow down. I wanted to take risks. Then I saw Diana's influence growing and I couldn't watch it anymore. So I left. I thought it was principle, but maybe I just didn't know how to fight. "You know how now," she said quietly. And that was the moment I realized the fight wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who'd been shut out, priced out, pushed out. It was about making space. 2 days later, I walked into City Hall. Mayor Prescott, a longtime friend of Diana's, greeted me with the tightest smile in recorded history. "Mr. Wexler, this is unexpected." "Not really," I said, placing a folder on his desk. "That's a formal notice of project withdrawal and a petition for city-led rezoning." He blinked. "You're halting the development." "Correct. And we're requesting a community forum. I want actual residents to weigh in on what gets built here. I think they've earned it." Prescott looked at me like I was speaking Latin. "That's not how business works." "No," I said, standing. "That's not how you work. That's how we used to work. But the rules are changing." And with that, I walked out. The forum was held 4 days later at the old Halston Community Hall, the very one slated for demolition. Hundreds showed up. Teachers, shop owners, former tenants, contractors, kids, veterans, people who'd spent their entire lives in Halston and never once been asked what they wanted built. I stood on that creaky wooden stage mic in hand, heart pounding. And I told them everything. The corruption, the stolen funds, the rebuild plan. Then I said the part that mattered most. We're not just rebuilding buildings. We're rebuilding trust. You tell me what you need and this company will back it. Fully, publicly, permanently. The applause was quiet at first, then louder, then standing. Afterward, a man approached me. Late 50s, weathered hands, eyes full of grief and steel. "You're Richard's boy, huh?" he said. "Yes, sir." He nodded. He believed in this town. He bled for it. "I know." He shook my hand. "Make him proud." That night, I stood outside the Weatherly house again. It was quiet, still. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a memory I was trying to outrun. It felt like home. The lawsuit made headlines faster than I expected. By Tuesday morning, Wexler family civil war was plastered across the Halston Tribune, the Daily Coast, and even a real estate column in the Sydney Business Ledger. Someone had leaked the filing, and while it wasn't me, I can't say I minded. It meant the truth was finally out. Diana and Tanner had been siphoning money through fake contracts, laundering it through shell firms, and repositioning the Wexler name for personal profit. A betrayal wrapped in spreadsheets. It hit harder because the company didn't just build structures, it built roots. Schools, parks, safe housing for retirees. Things that actually mattered to people. Now all of that had been jeopardized for private jets and developer handshakes. I was done being quiet. Within days, media trucks parked outside the Weatherly estate like it was some kind of reality show set. Diana refused to speak publicly. Madison issued a vague statement about family grief and confusion, and Tanner, he doubled down on Instagram. "Y'all believe everything you read. My uncle's just bitter he got left behind." That post alone made the case stronger, because I wasn't Tanner's uncle. I was his stepbrother. And that slip exposed what I already knew: they never saw me as family, only as a threat. At the office, Anna handed me a folder. "Local petition signatures," she said. "Over 1,000 people want the city to halt all legacy demolitions until the audit finishes." I scanned through the names, many I recognized from childhood. Teachers, coaches, neighbors, even a few people who used to babysit me. "They're standing with you," she said quietly. "Or standing against Diana," I replied. She shook her head. "Same thing these days." Meanwhile, Claire, our forensic auditor, uncovered something bigger. A wire transfer, one large enough to change everything. 6 months before your dad passed, she said, pointing to the ledger, a $1.2 million payout was issued to a consulting firm called Linscott Advisory. No deliverables, no internal contact. And guess who signed it? She slid the authorization across the desk. Tanner. The signature was unmistakable. But the timestamp was worse. It was dated the day after my father was discharged from the hospital, heavily sedated and bedridden. He couldn't have authorized anything, which meant Tanner forged it. I looked up at Claire. "This is criminal now, isn't it?" She nodded slowly. "This crosses the line into felony fraud and elder financial abuse." I met with my attorney the next morning. "We can fold this into the civil case," he said, "or we go straight to the DA and file criminal charges." I stared at the folder, heart pounding. Filing the charges would mean no turning back, no negotiation, no quiet settlement. It would mean Diana and Tanner could face jail time, possibly even asset seizures. And I'd be the one who made that happen. My lawyer watched me. "You sure about this?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth is I wasn't. That night, I visited my father's grave. I hadn't been back since the funeral, not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't sure I could look at his name carved in stone and feel anything other than guilt. Guilt for leaving, guilt for waiting too long. I stood there for a long time. Then I said the one thing I never got to say while he was alive. "I forgive you." The wind picked up, a soft breeze, a kind of reply. Then I added, "Now let's finish this." The next day I called the DA's office. By Friday, an official investigation was opened into Diana and Tanner Wexler for fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse. Subpoenas were issued. Accounts were frozen. Property seizures were quietly discussed behind closed doors. But something strange happened in the process. Madison reached out. I found her waiting outside the Wexler Properties building, arms crossed, sunglasses on, dressed like someone who just realized the ship she was on was sinking. "I don't want a lawyer," she said before I even spoke. "Then you probably shouldn't be talking to me," I replied, walking past. She followed. "Eli, wait, please." I stopped. She took off her sunglasses, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. Inside my office, she laid it all out. I didn't know the full extent she said. I knew Tanner was moving money, but I thought it was shady marketing payouts. I didn't know about the fake companies. I said nothing. "I tried to warn your father, but Diana shut me out. Said if I made noise, I'd lose everything." "You mean your cut?" "No," she said quickly. "My job. My place in the company. She threatened to have me audited. Said she'd pin the transfers on me if I ever went to him. And you just let her—" I was scared. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw someone trapped in a system she didn't build but didn't fight either. She handed me a USB drive. "It's everything I have. Meeting recordings, screenshots, transaction logs. I kept copies. I didn't know who I'd need to give them to, but I kept them anyway. Why now?" Madison looked at me dead in the eye. "Because I can live with losing the company. But I can't live with being her." The drive gave us everything we needed to close the loop. The real estate fraud. The forged signatures. The plans to sell Halston's main square to a foreign developer, a deal Diana had quietly signed contingent on my father's death certificate. And tucked inside one of the files, a memo from Diana's personal email to her attorney. Subject line: contingency, if Eli returns. In it, she outlined strategies to discredit me, challenge my legal standing, and manipulate media perception. She even referenced sending anonymous tips to local papers about my personal life overseas. She planned for war. She just didn't expect me to show up with an army. By the time the investigation reached the courts, the town had taken sides. Some still blamed me, said I was airing dirty laundry, tearing the Wexler name through the mud. But most finally saw what had really happened. They didn't see a family feud. They saw a cover-up unraveling. They saw the cost of silence. And they started speaking up. At the final city council meeting that month, the mayor stood up, flustered and stiff. The development proposal has been terminated, he announced, clearly annoyed. And all future contracts with Grayfield Holdings are hereby voided. There was no applause, just quiet nods. It wasn't celebration, it was relief, and maybe that's more powerful. Back at Wexler HQ, we began the real work. We launched a community review board, allocated funds to restore the youth shelter, revived the old vocational program my dad once funded for local trade apprentices. I didn't do it for PR. I did it because it felt right. Like maybe finally the family name meant something again. The last time I saw Diana, she didn't speak. We passed each other in the hallway during a court recess. Her lawyer flanked her like she was royalty under siege. She looked older, smaller, worn. She didn't meet my eyes, and I didn't stop walking. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of the Weatherly property, the same yard where I scraped my knees riding a bike too fast, where Dad used to grill on Sunday afternoons, where Diana once held her glossy fundraiser parties. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine. Not because the title was in my name. Not because a court had ruled in my favor. Not because Diana and Tanner had been indicted, though they had. It felt like mine because I stayed. Because I didn't run this time. The fallout when it came was quiet. No camera crews, no viral meltdown. Just a court order freezing Diana's assets, a deal struck behind closed doors, and an agreement that kept her out of prison but stripped her of every financial tie to Wexler Properties. Tanner took a plea deal. White-collar offenders always do. He's doing community service now, last I heard. Some nonprofit PR gig. Maybe he'll learn something. Maybe not. That part's not mine to fix. I spent the following months doing what Dad never got the chance to finish. We restructured the company from the inside out, flattened the leadership hierarchy, opened the books, invited local voices into the planning process. We established an annual audit system and made every upcoming development project available for public comment. And here's the part I'm proudest of. We broke ground on the Halston Commons project, a multi-use space with affordable housing, co-op business rentals, and a community-run food hall built inside the old post office. We named it after my father. A small plaque out front reads, "In memory of Richard Wexler, builder, believer, father." Every time I pass it, I feel two things: pride and peace. Leah stayed on as community director. She's the glue holding it all together, meeting with tenants, wrangling city council, running after-school programs in the new upstairs rec center. She never asked for a title, but she earned every inch of it. Sometimes we sit on the roof at night watching the town lights flicker on. "I can't believe we pulled it off," she said recently, half laughing, sipping tea from a chipped thermos. "We're not done yet," I said. She nodded. "But it feels different now, like it's breathing again." She wasn't wrong. There's still work to do. There always will be. Not everyone loves me. Some still see me as the guy who aired the family's dirty laundry. The guy who burned bridges to save a name he once walked away from. But more and more people just see Eli, someone trying to do the right thing even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. One day I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a neat envelope with an old-school wax seal. Inside was a simple card. "You were always meant to lead this. I just wish I'd told you that before it was too late." Dad, my hands trembled reading it. The handwriting was his. Real, familiar, like a fingerprint on my past. I don't know how or when he wrote it. Maybe Leah found it and never told me. Maybe Claire discovered it in a folder during the audit. Maybe it was buried under layers of dust and guilt and just made its way to me when it needed to. Doesn't matter. It found me. Just in time. I kept one thing from the old boardroom, the Count of Monte Cristo painting. I had it restored and reframed now, hanging in the new office lobby. People don't always get the reference, but it doesn't matter. It's for me. Because the point was never revenge. It was restoration. Revenge burns everything to the ground. Restoration builds something better from the ashes. Some days, I still catch myself staring at old photos. Me dad, my mom, before she passed, years before Diana stepped in. There's a younger version of me in those pictures, full of ideas and plans, and a little too much certainty. He had no idea what was coming, but I think he'd be proud of how I handled it, because I didn't just survive it, I transformed it. Halston isn't perfect now. It's still a town like any other flawed political messy, but it's also growing again. Not just upward, but outward. Not just newer, but truer. And maybe that's the real legacy. Not the land, not the money, not the lawsuits, but the version of a place that learns from its worst mistakes and dares to try again. The last scene I'll leave you with is this: a ribbon cutting at the Halston Commons. Kids laughing, a band playing, neighbors sharing folding chairs and lemonade, local vendors lined up in booths, the smell of barbecue and fresh bread in the air. And me? I stood off to the side, quiet. Not because I didn't belong, but because I didn't need the spotlight. I had something better. I had a town that finally knew who I was and why I came back. And I had peace. Not because I won the fight, but because I finished it. Story 2. In order to rescue their bakery and support my brother's gaming ambitions, my parents insisted that I leave school. I left after revealing a fact that devastated them. I'm a 20-year-old man in my second year of college who somehow ended myself in this strange, chaotic predicament with my family. It is the type of stuff you would believe only occurs in motion pictures. However, this is reality, and I am experiencing it. Perhaps putting everything in words would help me make sense of it, if nothing else. Okay, so here's the backstory. My family had a bakery that has been in operation for a very long time in the tiny town where I grew up. I'm referring to decades. My grandparents established it first, and once they retired, my parents took over. Everyone in town is aware of this type of establishment. It's always been there, not because it's elegant or anything. They purchase the same coffee bread and pastries that they had since they were little. For my parents, the bakery is their entire existence, not just a business. They have given it their all. Holidays, early mornings, and late nights. It makes no difference. This bakery, as my mother used to say, is the center of our family. My dad would continue to talk about it being our legacy. I occasionally volunteered as a child, primarily out of need. I would bag up orders, restock the pastry display, or sweep floors. It wasn't very serious, but it was enough to show me how much work goes into managing a facility like that. Occasionally, my parents would express their hope that either my younger brother or I would eventually take over. The thing is this: I never thought of myself in that position. Please understand that while I valued the bakery for what it wasn't my ideal. Unlike my parents, I didn't feel the same bond with it. I was more concerned with my studies and determining my own course. And then there's my younger brother, Trevor. Since we were little, he has been the golden child, and he is now 18. You are aware of the kind. According to my parents, he could do no wrong. They would pretend he was the most responsible child in the world if he could tidy his room without being asked. I was supposed to manage everything without any problems in the interim. When we were younger, Trevor would always get away with it while I would handle the majority of the household tasks. "Oh, he's not good at that," or "he needs more encouragement," my parents would remark. In the meanwhile, I receive a lecture on accountability if I ever forget to do something. There was more partiality than that. With each small accomplishment, Trevor received a new device. He received new headphones after passing a math test. He had no problems during a week of school. Brand new video game. Me, if I was lucky, I may acquire a nice job and bring home high marks. I wasn't looking for anything. It was more about the starkness of the treatment difference. I'd learned to let it go by the time I started high school. My goal was to gain admission to college. In order to help pay for school, I worked hard, saved as much as I could, and was able to obtain some scholarships. I worked part-time to help pay for groceries and textbooks, but my parents also helped out a little. I believed that once I departed for college, I would be free to concentrate on myself without having to worry about my family's problems. I felt like I had some breathing room for a time. On the weekends, I would return home, maybe assist with the bakery, and then return to university. Although it wasn't flawless, it was doable. The problem is that my parents would give me subtle clues about the bakery items whenever I returned home. Like, "You're so dependable that it's great to have you here. Without you, we don't know what we'd do." I could see they were putting the concept in my brain even though it was slight. Conversely, Trevor was hardly present. He would stop by for an hour, have a croissant, or sometimes tamper with the register before vanishing. If I ever pointed out that Trevor wasn't actually helping, My parents would dismiss me right away. He is still a young man who is still learning. He's not prepared for that level of responsibility, they would remark. I stopped arguing since it usually ended the same way, with me feeling like I was being unfair for wanting him to do his share of the talking, even if it didn't make sense. In any case, my second year of college was going well. I was working a part-time job, keeping up with my coursework, and felt like I was beginning to grasp my future. I then made the decision to visit my family one weekend. Like every previous visit, I expected to have a home-cooked lunch, perhaps lend a hand at the bakery for a little while, and then return to university. However, the atmosphere was very different when I arrived. With a very serious demeanor, my parents sat me down in the living room as if they had important news to share. Trevor was seated off to the side, hardly paying attention as he browsed through his phone. After that, they struck me with it. My mother was the first to speak. Her tone was forceful. "Look, we don't have enough employees. I can't do it alone, and neither can your father. Additionally, we've determined that it's time for you to assume responsibility for the family company. We'd like you to leave college. You're needed at the bakery." For a while, I paused, attempting to determine whether or not I had heard her correctly. Before I could even reply, my dad lunged forward as if he were doubling down. "Trevor isn't quite ready. He's still getting his bearings. But you're trustworthy, accountable. We've always known we could rely on you." At first, I was at a loss for words. I wasn't sure whether they thought I would answer yes with a grin. I'll simply discard all I've worked so hard to get, or if they genuinely believed that this was a fair request. In any case, it took me a while to process it. I was able to inquire at last. "Do you want me to quit college?" My mother nodded as if that were the most sensible thing ever. "We need a full-time employee in the bakery that we can rely on. We cannot continue to manage it alone. And at this time, hiring assistants is not an option. Later, perhaps after a few years when things are more secure, you could return to school." I turned to face Trevor, who was sitting there looking through his phone while wearing headphones halfway up. He hadn't even raised his head. "What about him?" Trying to speak steadily, I asked. "Why is he unable to assist?" Before my mother could respond, my father interrupted. "Though he's still young, Trevor will ultimately assist. He still hasn't decided what he wants to do." What I was hearing was unbelievable. He is just 2 years my junior. I made a point. Why do I not have the time to sort things out while he does? Why must I sacrifice everything for him to simply hang out? At last, Trevor glanced up, grinning as if the whole situation were a joke. He remarked nonchalantly, "I'm not really cut out for the bakery life. I have more ambitious intentions." I glanced back to my parents in the hopes that they would say anything coherent. Rather, my mother looked at me as if she was unhappy that I didn't agree right away. "You understand the significance of the bakery to this family," she remarked. "We've given up a lot to maintain it and support you. You need to give back now. Return the favor." I said it again a bit louder. "I've been putting a lot of effort into creating a future for myself. I've been maintaining my grades, working part-time, and paying for some of my own tuition. Do you want me to discard everything now, since Trevor isn't prepared?" "How fair is that?" My father's expression worsened. "This has nothing to do with fairness," he replied scathingly. "It has to do with family. Our legacy is the bread. We have nothing without it." My stomach twisted. I tried to remain composed and responded, "Then hire someone. I don't have to do this for you. Many folks would be thrilled to work." My mother gave a head shake. "We don't currently have the funds to recruit somebody. We can turn things around if you return and lend a hand even though things are tight. We don't want you to continue doing this indefinitely. Until we get back on our feet, that is." A wave of astonishment washed over me. "Do you really think I'll quit college and work for you for no pay at all? What sense does that have?" My voice rose a little as I asked. Anger made my dad's cheeks flush. "You're really self-centered." He lost his temper. "We've taken care of everything, covered the cost of your schooling, provided you with a roof over your head and food on the table. And now you're abandoning us when we need you most. You believe that simply because you are a college student, the world owes you something." It dawned on me then. They had already decided on something. This was not a conversation. An ultimatum was given. They didn't want my opinion. All they wanted was for me to get in line. I tried to control my shaking voice and murmured, "I'm sorry. However, I'm not leaving college. I've put in too much labor to get this point. I will not relinquish that." My father's face grew stern. "It's your decision if you don't want to be a part of this family," he remarked icily. "However, we will no longer help you if you leave now. Don't anticipate the tuition from us. Nothing more, not even rent. You're alone." They were aware that I would find it difficult to cover the remaining education expenses on my own. However, I overcame my dread. The demand was too great to ignore and comply with. My mother just nodded when I glanced at her, hoping for some indication that she disagreed with him or some sort of reassurance. Her expression was one of disappointment. "We've already made a lot of sacrifices for your education." "I said," she said, "the least you could do in exchange is this." Naturally, Trevor couldn't help but add his jarno too. "I suppose you're not as trustworthy as they believed." He grinned as he spoke. I paid him no attention. I felt a knot in my chest that would not go away, and my hands were balled into fists, but I was not going to give up. I said this time with more conviction, "I'm not dropping out." There was silence in the room. My mom looked like she would cry, and my dad's face was like stone. Looking smug, Trevor simply sat back in his chair. At last, my father got to his feet. His tone was steady and quiet. "Don't bother coming back if you leave this house without agreeing to help," he added. I took a minute to look at him and attempt to comprehend what he had just said. I got up too without any problems. I was able to utter it, my voice shaking as the words hung there. I simply left the home on foot. I didn't even bother to bid them farewell. My mom remained silent, and my dad's icy stare followed me all the way to the door. She didn't call me back, which I believe was part of my expectation that she would claim they didn't mean it. The weight of the entire talk seemed to fall on me the moment I went outdoors. My hands were trembling and my heart was pounding. I had no idea what to do or where to go. I just knew I couldn't remain there. Considering what they just stated, no. In the end, I drove to see Marcus, a buddy, his flat. He was the type of man you could rely on when things went wrong, and we had been close since high school. He sensed something was amiss the moment I arrived at his door after glancing at me. He moved over and opened the door. He seemed worried about me. Exhaustion weighed heavily on me as I entered and left my luggage beside the couch. He provided his support right away, saying I could stay for as long as I needed to, without much explanation. His guarantee provided a minor but much-needed reprieve. Right then. I didn't get much sleep that night. I had a lot of questions and concerns running through my head. Without my parents' assistance, how was I going to pay for school? What about food and rent? What about my belongings? The majority of my belongings were still at home. I couldn't simply abandon everything. I made the decision to return early the next morning. I had no intention of staying long. Enough time to get my necessities. Marcus volunteered to accompany me, but I assured him that I would be well. I didn't want him to be involved in the mess. After I entered the driveway, I felt sick to my stomach. I no longer felt like I belonged in that house. I wasn't in the mood to wait for someone to allow me in, so I entered without knocking. In the kitchen, my mother was going over some documents. When she noticed me, she glanced up. She seemed surprised and disappointed at the same time. "Have you regained consciousness?" She put down the papers and asked. I answered, "I'm just here to grab my stuff," ignoring the query. She didn't protest, but her face drooped a little. "We're just doing this because we care about you, you know," she continued. I didn't answer. I simply went to my room and began packing. As I packed a duffel bag full of clothing, my father showed up in the doorway. Watching me as if he was waiting for me to break, he leaned against the frame. I continued packing. "I don't understand why it would be better to stay here and forfeit all I've fought so hard to achieve." Without glancing at him, I said, "Do you believe that you are now too good for this family?" He fired back. "Being overly excellent isn't the point," I remarked as I closed the bag. It's about not wasting my future because Trevor is idle and doesn't want to assist. When Trevor is brought up. My father's face grew even more serious. With a harsh tone, he said, "Your brother needs time." I am prepared for this level of responsibility, and he is not. I turned to him and inquired, "He gets away with it while you're prepared to let me give up everything. How fair is that?" For that, he had no response. Rather, he only muttered something under his breath, shook his head, and left. Just as I was ready to go away, Trevor appeared. He flashed me one of his signature smirks as he emerged from his room, earbuds still hanging around his neck. "Are you already leaving?" he inquired. I didn't respond. I didn't want to listen to his bullshit. "Don't let the door strike you while you're leaving, though." He laughed as he spoke. My annoyance boiled over as I turned to face him. "You are aware that this is also your mess. Perhaps this wouldn't be occurring if you took initiative for once." He gave an eye roll. "It's not my issue." I was too exhausted to fight with him. I made my way to the door after slinging my backpack over my shoulder. In the hallway, my mother was waiting. Her eyes were filled with tears. "Don't expect us to help you anymore if you leave now," she warned, her voice shaking. "Recall that there is no rent, no tuition, nothing. You will be alone." That's what I assumed. I spoke, attempting to maintain a steady tone. I left after saying that. Despite the calm journey back to Marcus's apartment, my mind wouldn't stop talking. I kept reliving the entire situation with my parents, questioning everything I said. Yes, I was aware that standing my position was the appropriate thing to do. Honestly, I was terrified, but there was no way I was going to throw away all I had fought so hard to achieve. What if I was unable to pay my tuition or rent? What if everything went wrong? It was terrible, and the thought of being totally alone for the first time was much more real now. I became aware that my hands were clutching the wheel as if it were the only thing keeping me together by the time I turned into Marcus's driveway. I grabbed all I could from my parents' house and spent the night at Marcus's house. Even though I didn't yet have a clear strategy, I was certain that I wasn't going back. I was not going to sacrifice my future to tidy up their mess. My parents promptly fulfilled their threats the following day. I discovered my phone line had been disconnected when I woke up. Until I put up a prepaid subscription, I was unable to text or phone anyone. In addition, it appears that my mom terminated the auto pay they were using, which is why my rent payment rejected. They seemed to be trying to constantly remind me that I was now on my own. They seemed calculating and spiteful, as if they were attempting to have me reconsider my choice. I'm not going to lie. For a moment, it was effective. I had the thinking that perhaps it would be simpler to simply go back and follow their wishes. Then I recalled how my father regarded me as though I had let him down, and Trevor's sly smile, which seemed to indicate that he knew I would finally give in and rescue the day. I was startled out of it by that. I rushed to solve the problem. I started by getting an inexpensive prepaid phone plan from a local store. Although it wasn't ideal, I was at least able to interact once more. To make sure my parents couldn't tamper with anything else, I next began going through all of my bank accounts and other bills. It wasn't until I began digging that I realized how much they had. I couldn't afford to miss anything, even though everything was overwhelming. The majority of it, including my rent utilities and auto payment, had been resolved by the end of the day, and I finally had control over it. At least I was moving forward, even if it seemed like I was cleaning up after a hurricane. For me at the time, money was the main concern. Before all of this, my part-time work at the cafe barely paid for textbooks and food. I now needed to find a way to extend that money to pay for electricity rent and other expenses. I asked my manager if I might take on more shifts. He first hesitated because of the already busy schedule, but in the end, he let me a few more hours. It was a beginning, but not much. I next proceeded to the school's financial assistance office. It was difficult to explain my predicament to them. They were surprisingly understanding, even though I detested feeling like I was pleading for assistance. I applied for a modest personal loan and an emergency scholarship with the assistance of the counselor I spoke with. It relieved part of the strain, but it wouldn't cover all. Since they were no longer able to contact me via phone, my parents began bombarding my social media accounts. They bombarded me with messages on Instagram and Facebook. My father's words were concise and direct. "You're being self-centered. Return and tidy up this mess." My mother's were all about how I was destroying my family. Then there was Trevor. Even though he just sent one message, it was enough to make me furious. "You're really foolish for choosing the difficult route. You're simply making your life more difficult needlessly." Simple route. Despite having done nothing to assist the bakery, this man had the audacity to declare it simple. He didn't know what it was like to balance employment, education, and now all these unforeseen expenses. While I was out here struggling to stay afloat, he was sitting at home doing nothing. My parents began telling the rest of the family their version of events, which only made matters worse. Through an aunt, I learned that my dad had been telling people that I had left the bakery and left them in a difficult situation. He portrayed me as an unappreciative child who didn't give a damn about our heritage or family. On my dad's side, my aunts and uncles wholeheartedly accepted my parents' version of events. They began sending me messages stating that I needed to take charge and act morally for the family. Given how close they are to my parents, it was frustrating but not shocking. However, some cousins were more dubious and wanted to hear my side of the story. I was honest with them. Trevor wasn't even willing to assist with the store, so my parents wanted me to ruin my future in order to save him. It hurt more than I anticipated that some of them still seemed to feel that I was the selfish one, even if they claimed to understand me. It was draining, financially, emotionally, and even with regard to how my own family saw me. I felt like I was engaged in a never-ending war. I made an effort to keep my attention on the tasks at hand, but sometimes it felt like too much. I once heard Marcus expressing my predicament to someone over the phone. "You know you're doing better than most people would in your shoes," he commented to me after hanging up. Even though I didn't feel like I was doing well, it was somewhat comforting to hear him say that. I began putting together a strategy over the course of the following several days. I created a rigorous spending plan and eliminated any wasteful spending. No more streaming services or takeaway. Nothing that wasn't absolutely necessary. I began researching alternative part-time occupations that would offer more hours or a higher salary. Despite everything, it was obvious that I would need to make some significant compromises in order to finish the semester. Even while the emergency loan and scholarship helped, they weren't enough to cover all of my tuition costs. Despite a modest change in tone, my parents continued to write messages. While my mom's communications grew increasingly urgent, my dad's remained stern and demanding. She wrote things like, "We really need you to return before it's too late, and Trevor isn't handling the pressure well." They gave the impression that the bakery was about to fail. That didn't alter my choice, but I'm not sure if it was real or simply another ploy to manipulate me. I'm standing my ground and working things out piece by piece for the time being. I'm still attempting to comprehend some of it. I was frantically trying to find out how to survive when my parents totally cut me off, so I was taking up where I left off last time. I was working additional shifts at the restaurant and trying to keep up with my studies, and I had so far been able to arrange my rent and convert to a prepaid phone plan. I was determined to make things work, even if it was difficult. I've been learning more about the situation at the bakery over the last 2 weeks, and let's just say it doesn't seem good. Based on what I've learned from friends and locals, the bakery is in danger of closing down. It seems like my folks are having a hard time keeping up with everything. Customers are seeing a drop in quality, and the shelves aren't as packed as they once were. The atmosphere inside the bakery has dramatically changed, according to Chloe, one of my friends who periodically visits. She remarked, "My parents always seem stressed out, yelling at each other and at customers. They seem to be struggling to keep things together." I initially believed that to be the inevitable result of their losing an additional pair of hands. It seemed reasonable that they would be having difficulties without me because I accomplished a lot when I volunteered. However, after that, I began to hear reports about more serious matters like unpaid bills, financial difficulties, and even the possibility that they were in debt. Hearing it was difficult. To be honest, I don't want to see the bakery fail in spite of everything that has transpired. Since I can remember, it has been a part of my life, and I am aware of how much it means to my parents. However, when additional information became available, I came to the conclusion that much more was happening than I had first believed. It became quite disorganized. One day, Chloe said she had seen a notice regarding a late payment on the door of the bakery. Although she was unable to pinpoint its particular purpose, it appeared to be significant. That piqued my interest, so I did some research. I was reluctant to ask my parents outright. I did some internet spying and even asked some mutual contacts if they had heard anything, but it was definitely not eye-opening. After a while, I came upon something that made my stomach turn. It turns out that my parents used the bakery as security for a sizable debt they had taken out some time ago. The loan itself was not wholly unexpected. Small firms do that occasionally after all. However, the reason for their actions drew my interest. I initially assumed it was only to maintain the bakery's operations. Perhaps they needed more money to develop the firm or pay for supplies. However, I later discovered the true cause. Trevor. My parents weren't only attempting to keep the bakery open, it seems. They were attempting to finance a large, covert scheme for him. As far as I can tell, Trevor had persuaded them that he had a great business concept and grand aspirations. His goal was to open his own upscale gaming cafe. How people listened to him is beyond me. He lacked any qualifications or actual experience to support it. In the hopes of becoming wealthy, he has simply pieced together trendy terms and eye-catching concepts from what he has seen online. When I discovered some documents in Chloe's house, I learned about this. In summary, she had a buddy who worked with my parents in the past, and they exchanged some old documents that were forgotten. A loan application that included Trevor's name and his business plan was one of the documents. Things worsen. The bakery wasn't the only entity linked to the debt. To get the money, they had also mortgaged a portion of their house. They were placing all their money on Trevor's alleged grand scheme. It seemed unbelievable to me. Even though he had never demonstrated any genuine accountability or dedication to anything, they were prepared to jeopardize their whole means of subsistence in order to support his goal. In hindsight, everything began to make sense. In addition to trying to keep the family company afloat, they were pressuring me to drop out of school and assist at the bakery in order to make up for Trevor's failure. While they invested funds and resources in his initiative, they required me to fill in and keep the bakery operating. Why they didn't notify me right away is beyond me. Perhaps they felt ashamed, or perhaps they assumed that if I knew the truth, I would flatly reject. In any case, it seemed like yet another betrayal. They didn't even have the grace to be honest about their willingness to put Trevor's future ahead of mine. My anger increased as I gave it more attention. While they have been going above and above to support Trevor's pipe dream, I have been working really hard to make ends meet. And with all of this, where is Trevor? Not a trace. His great ambitions haven't materialized, and from what I've heard, he's hardly active with the bakery anymore. It's frustrating, but it also confirms what I've been feeling for some time. Walking away was the proper thing to do. I wouldn't have done much more than cover up an issue I didn't cause if I had stayed. Nevertheless, knowing that the bakery is in such poor condition is difficult. As I previously stated, it has played a significant role in my life, and I am aware of the blood, sweat, and tears my parents have shed over the years. However, I can't help but think that by placing all of their hopes in Trevor's basket, they made a mess. I'm concentrating on staying afloat for now. Although I've been able to establish a schedule for budgeting and schoolwork, I still have a lot of work ahead of me. After this, I'm not sure what will happen with the bakery, and to be honest, I'm not sure if my relationship with my parents will ever be completely restored. The last time I spoke, I explained that I had learned about the loan my parents had taken out, and that it wasn't only for the bakery's survival. It was to finance Trevor's alleged ambitious goals. It was difficult enough to digest that discovery alone. Knowing that my parents were risking everything for Trevor and asking me to sacrifice my future just made the repercussions from being cut off and attempting to put my life back together harder. Since I left, I hadn't had direct conversations with Trevor or my parents. My mom and I had mostly spoken via their remorseful social media posts, but this week she gave me a surprise phone call. She called from a number I didn't know, most likely because I had blocked her primary phone and nearly didn't answer. I regret doing so. She sounded worn out and about to cry, which immediately caught me off guard. I briefly believed that she was at last prepared to express regret or at the very least admit how unjust things had been. However, the first thing she said was, "We need you to return." I remained silent so she could speak. She continued by talking about how Trevor's great opportunity had not gone as planned and how the bakery was having problems. She didn't elaborate, but it was obvious that whatever fantasy he had persuaded them to believe had failed. Then she struck me, her voice cracking as Trevor struggled. "He's struggling to cope with the pressure. I'm doing everything I can with your father, but without you, we can't do this." Despite everything, I still couldn't believe what I was hearing. They continued to put Trevor's needs ahead of mine. They weren't phoning to see how I was doing or to apologize. All they wanted was for me to return and tidy up their mess. Why would I do that? Trying to speak steadily, I asked. You interrupted me, informed me that I was no longer a member of the family, and now you want me to return as if nothing had occurred. We didn't mean it, she said as she began to cry. We have always cared for you, you know. However, she became combative when I questioned her about the loan and Trevor's role. She asserted that they thought he had promise and that they were only attempting to guide him along his path, adding that sometimes taking chances is necessary for families. Trevor had no genuine expertise or track record, so I cautioned her it was irresponsible to stake their home bakery on his pipe dream. Other than the fact that we believed it would work out, she didn't have much to say about it. My dad picked up the phone at that point. He was upset. He said I was selfish for not helping them and accused me of leaving them. You were reared by this family who gave you everything, and now you're abandoning us just when we need you most. Oh, he said. I lost my temper. When you made the decision to mortgage the bakery for Trevor, you didn't need me. When you stopped paying my rent or my education, you didn't need me. Now, since you have no other alternatives, you just need me. Trevor is also unable to clean up this mess. My father became even more irate and said that I was unaware of the amount of effort and sacrifice they had made for the bakery and for me. But it was the end of me. Make a sacrifice. You're the ones who choose to sacrifice everything for Trevor, I said. You didn't care how much it cost me, and you didn't ask me what I thought. Therefore, don't sit there and pretend that I have any debt to you. Before he could utter another word, I hung up. I was frightened by the call, but it also validated something I had been avoiding for some time. I had to entirely cut them out of my life. Every encounter with them just served to revive old wounds and made me realize how little Trevor was worth to them. Speaking of Trevor following the call, he left me a final voicemail. He went on a lengthy tirade about how I was failing the family and how he was doing all in his power to succeed. He even attempted to make it seem as though I was the cause of his failed intentions, claiming that things may have turned out differently if I had stayed and assisted at the bakery. I didn't answer. What might be said? He will never own up to his mistakes, and I'm tired of squandering my time on someone who is incapable of seeing the harm he has caused. This is where I am at the moment. They were all blocked by me. Trevor, my parents, and even the intrusive family members who are constantly attempting to influence me to act morally. I removed them from my social media accounts. I instructed my close pals to disregard any messages they might get for my family and changed my phone number once more. It's a difficult choice, and I understand that there will be lonely days, but I can't continue to put myself in predicaments where I'm used as a scapegoat or a fallback option. Right now, I'm concentrating on my coursework, staying on top of my job, and gradually regaining my confidence. Although it's undoubtedly difficult and not flawless, it seems like the proper course of action. Once again, I want to thank everyone who has read and helped me along the way. You have no idea how much your counsel and kindness have meant. As I end this, keep in mind that you have the right to prioritize yourself if you ever find yourself in a similar circumstance. Be careful, everyone. While keeping the original English language and narrative flow, this translation has perfect punctuation. Fixed any small spelling mistakes, such as canal to canceled, changed numbers to text G21 into 20, and arranged the information into full phrases and paragraphs.